So I just wanted to thank Laura Cattari for being here as a senior policy analyst with the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction. Laura is an amazing person, a wealth of knowledge. I come across your work and your advocacy, and I'm continuously blown away. But I think also when you're talking about these issues through and bringing it to the Jewish community, which you are a part of, it's a good example of faith in action and the idea of Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, but people need to know what's going on. And so thank you so much for being here and for talking about this. It really matters.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm not sure if I'm co-host, but I'd like to share my slides this evening. It will make it.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Should I? Okay.
Yeah.
So share screen. Let me find the right one. You don't want to see my mailbox. Trust me, it's not a good thing. Are you seeing all of it or just the plan window?
I'm seeing the whole screen.
Okay, let me stop then. Stop sharing. Every time I get an update, it resets my so play in window. Okay, that should work this time. And it doesn't look like it.
That's the thing with computers. It makes things easier until it doesn't work, and then it doesn't make things easier.
View. How do I close all this format? Why is it doing this? It was working so well.
You can see the full screen, Laura. If you like, I've done that so many times for my board meetings. No offense, Mel, cover your ears. I've actually, the slideshow stuff is always difficult. There we go.
There, a bit better.
Maybe.
Well, I have my arrow keys, so hopefully this will work. So, hello. Some of you I've met before. I remember Mel from our last outing, the first part one. And Hinda, I believe we've met before. So hello, Rob. And Steve and I go back a long ways. So Poverty in Hamilton Part 2, there are 3 things I'd like to go over. And unfortunately, I'm going to be whipping through them very quickly. It's difficult right now. It's such a shifting landscape in Hamilton. Right now, they're telling us unemployment is at 6.3% in Hamilton, which is almost what it was pre-pandemic. I think we're just a bit lower. So things should be looking rosy, and yet they're not. And one of the things we're finding is there's more of an inequity, a deeper divide in our community than ever before. And so when we talk about recovery, which is the Hamilton poverty reduction efforts that I'll get to near the end, it's scary. The landscape isn't settled yet. So let me just, oh, come on. No, I'm going to have to view my side navigator.
Well, don't feel bad, Laura. I had to watch videos on how to use Zoom, because it seems everybody's using Zoom these days. You know?
Well, I used it just the other day and played a video off my slides, and it was just centered. I know I'm missing just one thing, but oh well. Participants can now see my screen. Perfect. So, assessing the impact of COVID-19 on workers, workplaces, and families. This was some research that was undertaken at McMaster. It was in co-investigators from both the Labor Studies Department and the Political Science Department in partnership with the community, and the community in this case was the Roundtable, so I got to work on this. And it was basically a survey that went out, and people got to answer it between August and December 2020. It was for working age adults, not anyone who's retired, so we're not even touching the whole issue around CPP, GIS during COVID, and looking at what people's experiences were. So delving right into the data, I hope everyone can see it clearly, and you can adjust your screen to get it as big as possible. But as soon as COVID hit, there were some interesting changes in terms of monthly employment income. And this study is actually across Ontario. It's about 2,000 people, fairly well distributed in different regions. And so we saw 61% of people with CERB had their income go down. We saw unexpectedly people on Ontario Works and ODSP also saw their income go down, even if they didn't qualify for CERB. So people were working part-time and lost their income. And even people who had no government support whatsoever, 16% of people saw their incomes go down. So with that in mind, it's no surprise people saw personal debt increase. And so the orange, can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
When I do this? Great. So the orange is people on Ontario Works and ODSP. They saw the highest debt increase, 61% of them. Then CERB and Canadian Emergency Student Benefit saw 42% of people say yes, their personal debt increased. And even amongst those that didn't go for government support, we're looking at 30%. What I found most interesting is even amongst people that did not have supports, even 7% of them actually fell behind in paying their debts. So people became more deeply indebted for average things they had to pay, their cell phones, paying utilities, things like that. They fell behind. And when we look at it between two people, one on CERB, one on ODSP, you'll see though the situations are different, the impact was just as bad on both. So although CERB has definitely been helpful, it's hard to afford decent housing because the prices are outrageous and I still pay bills, keep my much needed used vehicle on the road and keep food in my cupboards. I have had to borrow money to get me through and it's put me more in debt. And that's someone receiving CERB. And it's going to be important to note how difficult it was to keep up with CERB in a little bit. Someone on ODSP, my cost of living is increased and yet no additional funds are available. PPE costs money. I can't shop according to what's on sale. I can't access secondhand stores for clothing I need. Coping strategies to live on a small income have been obliterated by COVID and the government needs to help us now. And that's someone on ODSP. How did people cope with financial stress? Well, guess what? They didn't. And so you see so many relying on family and friends, 40% for social assistance, 30% on CERB. Even those without assistance, 10% were still asking family. What is deeply concerning is the increased use of payday lending amongst people on social assistance. For those on CERB, it was a line of credit that they continued to take out. And even those that didn't have government support, almost 20% also needing to use a line of credit to keep going. And it's the pawnbrokers that scares me the most. So you saw people on social assistance, 10% of them needing to sell what they had. And for people on CERB, you're looking at 6.4%. And if you see down here, it's very statistically relevant. These are not numbers that sort of like, we're not sure about this. These are really statistically relevant numbers. Food and COVID. Orange bars, just to let you know, are social assistance again. So not enough to eat, days with no food, buying less nutritious food, use of charities for food, all of them for social assistance skyrocketed. And especially buying less nutritious food, 62% of social assistance recipients cited that as happening during COVID. But what's really scary for me, we had $2,000 for CERB, and 1/4 of respondents on CERB also bought less nutritious food. Days with no food, 1 in 10, 11% of CERB recipients were still going without food.
Wow.
And they're getting $2,000 a month because housing, right? We get the idea that costs are just very high. So of course, change in physical and mental health declined. Everyone, you know, the average was 70%, and we range between 84%. Even those without losing their income still said 64.9, 65% had issues with mental health. And this is someone who wasn't receiving any assistance. And she said, my work hours got slashed at the beginning of lockdown. My mental health suffered greatly. My work hours have increased to nearly unmanageable, so it shifted, and my benefits are on hold. So even people that continued working, and I'm going to say an educated guess that most people that answered our survey, and we didn't ask people what their income was, but we're going to guess that people that answered our survey were not making $150,000 a year. And even if you're working full-time and minimum wage, that's still deeply problematic. And here we see minimum wage before deductions at 35 hours is only $2,161 for 35-hour work week. So that's, you know, less than 200 more than what CERB is. ODSP is $1,169 a month, and $733 for those on Ontario Works. Change in the views of the role of government. Now this warms my heart as a policy analyst and advocate. So when we look at this, we see, so changing views about the role of government in supporting society. How many people changed their view about, yes, government should be doing this? Well, no surprise, people on social assistance knew the answer. 66.7% said, yes, we need more support. Oddly, people on CERB, 66.2% learned the lesson that, hey, government helping people in society is a good thing. And even people that did not receive direct financial assistance, 60.2% also believed that government should be supporting society. And we call these punctuated shifts in thinking. And big crisis, like a pandemic, is apt to do that. It's just nice to see it played out. And you can see less supportive, not so much, not so many people answering. Only 2.6 of people who received nothing said, no, you know, government shouldn't be supporting people more. This is really tiny. I will ensure that Alexis has a copy of this so you can all see the smaller print. Unfortunately, it's very hard on Zoom to get something that's this tall shown. What we see is post-COVID policy priorities by type of government support. So what areas? And respondents had to pick their top 3 of 7. And the tiniest one, the one with the least support, means none of the above. So 2,000 people sort of walked away and said, no, it's not. It's not that we don't want the government to do something. And it did shift amongst groups. No government support thought universal childcare was really important. I could imagine working moms, especially, thinking about that. Least important amongst people on social assistance not working makes sense. But as a staff member of the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction, it was the bottom one that really killed me. Amongst social assistance recipients, for 91% to say they wanted to see a basic income was not unusual. But what was surprising is people receiving no support, 57% said yes to basic income. And that's the highest ranked out of all the options here. It's right here. And for people on CERB, that was 72.5%. Pretty amazing shift. So before I go to recovery and renewal about social assistance, I just want to say this study that we did with McMaster, we're going to be doing a part 2 where we've already completed the paperwork, we're looking for funding, and we'll be looking at recovery for the same people. We'll reach out to them again, but just generally as well, ensuring that the work people are going back to is good work, pays well, stable, that precarious work or gig economy is not what they go back to, that it doesn't actually get worse instead of better. And we'll be looking at that. But in the meantime, through the pandemic, the Ontario government has gone ahead and they have a revisioning strategy called Recovery and Renewal. They've been doing it step by step during the pandemic, very little fanfare and quite frankly, very little consultation, even though they said they would. So the core of the transformation following principles. So they prioritize employment. Who knew our provincial government would prioritize employment? Financial resilience and independence. They don't want people on the system. But supporting positive client and staff experiences, assigning roles in the transformation where they think it makes most sense and is most efficient, improving program integrity, AKA make sure people aren't cheating. That's what improved program integrity means. Designing in partnership with municipalities, and I'll get to that a little later, a consultation I was part last week. Building a system that puts people at the center with services that work effectively, and using data, evidence, and the voice of clients to inform design, and changing the caseworker role to more life stabilization. And we're going to use air quotes with that because there is no definition of life stabilization in the act they created to implement life stabilization. It's always fun when legislation has absolutely no definition of what your municipality is supposed to do. So in their paperwork, they talk about understanding people's needs beyond just employment, help guide individuals through personalized planning, and include hands-on support to navigate broader system of community supports, which would include Jewish Family Services, maybe a referral to them, primary health care, housing, childcare, financial literacy, digital access, mental health, and addictions. All these programs, even tax filing, so they can get the credits they're owed. Great, that's fantastic. Doesn't this sound wonderful? What does this mean in reality? What does it mean? Well, it means digital transformation. That's the first part they undertook. They want online applications This government is currently very afraid that the federal tap will be turned off completely and everyone will apply for social assistance. And so they have prepared a centralized provincial portal for people to apply online. They've also expanded this to ODSP, the Ontario Disability Support Program. They've also included self-management of account information. So if you don't know me, I'm also still on ODSP. So I do my earnings every month. I use this portal. It's great. But quite frankly, if I didn't have a computer or internet, because I work from home, I have both, it would be very difficult. And all online communication. So they've been playing with this idea that you call a centralized service line, customer service, and you talk to them before you get to talk to your caseworker. And that really didn't go over well. It's back to me contacting my caseworker directly, but I think they tried to do it like a CSR system for like tech support. It was not smooth. I was personally given misinformation that had me panicking at one point, thinking I wasn't going to get paid. All transformation of a system that you don't talk to clients about is going to feel scary to them, really. Then municipalities provide the life stabilization. Now, currently, the municipality is the Ontario Works Office, and that's how it works across the province. All Ontario Works offices are led by the municipality. It's municipal workers. The province pays the municipality to deliver Ontario Works. The Ontario Disability Support Program, on the other hand, is provincial. What they see happening is transferring all life stabilization to the municipality, and even ODSP, the caseworker I currently have, will only be doing financial verification for me, and anything I need, even I as an ODSP person have to deal with the Ontario Works Office. And if you haven't heard, there's a new employment system in the Hamilton, Brant, Niagara area. There are 3 pilot sites in Ontario over the past couple of years. We are one of them. Our group is called FedCap. They're massive. They're supposed to be a nonprofit. We're kind of skeptical. The head office currently is in Wales. And it's the same type of setup right now that the UK did very badly. And so we're a little afraid in my office about what's going on. Apparently they've had enormous success, all these people getting off social assistance during the pandemic, but we aren't told how many are placed versus how many people are kicked off. These people, through legislation, have been given the power of government. So a private entity has the power to kick people off, but has zero obligation to tell us what they're doing and how. That's more than a little scary. We don't know how many people have been sent for job training. We don't know how good the jobs, what kind of placement they've been put in. Anyhow, I'm sort of going on to what's the problem. That's part of the problem. Privatization of Employment Ontario is where they're headed. They've loved the numbers that have come out. We're talking 37,000 people in less than a year in 3 areas of Ontario during a pandemic. That's a lot of turnover for Ontario Works. Municipal discretion for life stabilization will mean not all parts of Ontario will receive the same services. So one of the benefits of ODSP is that when something is mandatory, every office in Ontario, it doesn't matter where you live in Ontario, you get the same services and the same supports. You have the same rights as anyone else. When municipalities have discretion, you will have some municipalities that can afford to do more and some that can afford to do less. And so in rural areas, there might be nothing. They might not even be afford to buy people's cell phones as part of life stabilization like they've been doing in Hamilton during the pilot. So that's scary. So for me, the worst is there's no new funding for sports. So they say life stabilization, mental health, affordable housing, but they're not putting any dollars into any of that. So people are still waiting over a year for counseling. And some of the numbers are coming back and some of the feedback's coming back about, you know, the online mental health supports versus actually seeing a doctor and CBT one-on-one in person, and they're not great. Yeah. Now, a lot of what they're doing was part of Income Security Roadmap for Change. Full disclosure, I was part of that group, the old government that wrote that document, that roadmap for reforming social assistance. They use our terminology, including life stabilization, but they're missing one really important thing. Income supports, when they're inadequate, it undermines all efforts to stabilize someone. If people are concerned they can't keep their housing, they're not focusing on employment. They're not feeling well. They're mental health sufferers. Like, there's so much that goes into life stabilization. And I'm going to say, I was at consultation, and the ministry corporate office put together the consultation. So it was delivered locally, but the questions all came from on high, sort of thing. And, you know, it says, you know, how do you feel about, you know, this life stabilization locally, you know, and it actually said referring people to food banks. I was like, why don't you provide adequate rates and then you don't have to fund food banks and refer people to food banks? And the money, and both municipally and provincially, they do fund food banks. There are grants that go out to food banks. And yet we don't increase. So how bad is social assistance? We saw the McMaster report that's saying even people on CERB were struggling. Well, last a week Monday, we had something called Frozen in Time Part 2. It was looking at social assistance rates. And we did a little "the price is wrong" game. There was an op-ed recently in the Spec, I think it was syndicated with the Star, and it featured this graphic that I created. And it's scary. So back in 1995, social assistance rates were slashed by 21.6%. It was under what was then the Harris government. At that time, they created what is now called Ontario Works and the Ontario Disability Support Program. Before that, it was one program, everyone together, family benefits. And so when we look at this, we look at, you know, eggs going up 141% since then. 53% for toilet paper. When we did this 5 years ago, by the way. And so price of toilet paper has gone down. I don't believe that, but apparently it has.
Yeah, it has.
Has it gone down? You've noticed, huh?
Oh, yeah.
So bread is up 126% over the past 25 years. Bus tickets, 91%. Bachelor apartment, 127%. I thought that was pretty conservative, actually. But when you take the pre-cut amount, which is about $689 back in 1995, to $733 today, that's a 14.6% increase.
That's full market, right, Laura?
Yeah. So that's really scary. If it had just gone with standard inflation, it would be $1,053.93 today, much closer to what ODSP is. And for short term, it would be a lot more manageable in between jobs. Not easy. I mean, if you lost a job, you could possibly still lose your apartment, depending on how much your apartment costs with that. But understanding when you don't increase the rates, there are very specific things that happen. You can't talk about life stabilization of an individual and look at this. Like the two don't go together.
Yeah.
So is fear of welfare fraud a good reason not to increase rates? Because let's be serious, we saw earlier, the integrity, the program integrity people that they've been hiring. I've seen the actual job calls for the province for this, which is sort of funny given one of the ministry's own people is now being charged and going to court with fraud, I think $12 million due to the the $200 families were supposed to get for schools. Yeah, someone in the tech department decided to make a whole bunch of fraudulent claims, $12 million. But why don't we go after people on social assistance instead, right? So is fear of welfare fraud a good reason to not increase rates? So here we are. These are the cases as of August 2021. So cases is households, not individuals. So Ontario Works, believe it or not, is 181,000, say 182,000 if you're rounding up, across the entire province. ODSP is 371,448. Yes, there has been a sharp increase in ODSP. There are some good reasons for that. 3 reasons for that. One, an aging population. As people get older, more people tend to go on disability, and with a larger group that's passing through right now, yeah, that impacts it. They've totally undermined WSIB, throwing people that used to get workers' comp onto ODSP. And the biggest reason that no one ever talks about is in the past 20 years, short-term benefits and long-term benefits through work do not exist for the vast majority of people. So if you become ill, you're on the public system. People don't have short-term insurance anymore or long-term insurance. So this is where they're ending up. And the government does not like it. So I'm going to ask you, how much fraud do you think happens? You can say it out loud, you can put it in chat. How much fraud do you think happens? They do calculate this. So what do you think they're dealing with? Because that's 500,000, more than 500,000 cases across the province right now.
I would say less than 2%.
2%? Okay. Anyone else want to give it a try? No shaming, no nothing. Just don't worry, you can say it. Well, I will tell you, Mike Harris campaigned on a 16% fraud claim that he was going to clean up social assistance, and he did within a year of gaining office. And then when they looked at it all, they realized, oh, we were wrong. That's overpayments. There's 4% fraud. And we're like, And then they went away, and academics and policy wonks like myself started looking into this. No, Alexis, you're 10 times what it actually is.
Oh my gosh.
0.2%
Wow.
fraud rate per annum. That's 1,107 cases out of more than 500,000 cases. So what we're essentially doing when we claim fraud as a factor, that you don't want to give people too much money, you know, because it's going to be wasted and it's not good for the taxpayer. Right now, there are 845,000 people who rely on this system, including, you know, their children, younger family members, spouses, and they're all living subsistence levels because of 1,107 cases.
Oh, that's terrible.
I get very aggravated. There's so many reasons people tell me why we can't do social assistance, right? The other one, of course, is we just can't afford it. We can't afford adequacy. And last week, frozen in time, we had a special guest with us, Dr. Dennis Raphael from York University. He's one of the leading researchers that has put together the most definitive list of what we call the social determinants of health. It's internationally acknowledged. Income ranks #1, more than smoking, poor lifestyle, a whole bunch of other issues combined. Income determines your health. And it is so intertwined with it that he, as a researcher, is starting to bring back, and oddly enough, this term was coined back in the Harris era, I wonder why, but they called it social murder. And social murder, as researchers look at it, is when policy is intentionally ignored or set at levels that harm people. They know it harms people, and policy just remains the same. And he called it social murder. Now, generally, when I go around talking to politicians, I don't use that term because they will never talk to me again. But
No, I can get it.
you know, they don't like it. But it really made me think, because we know it costs more in the long run to keep people ill and homeless, to forego over 1 in 10 people's revenue that they could if they could be employed. We know through McMaster University and working with, and I'm going, Dr. Munir, no, Dr. Munir Sheikh. I'm going to blank on this gentleman's name. He was undersecretary at the UN, and he happens to be at McMaster, and he's an incredible economist, and I'm blanking on his name. But we know when you give money to people with low incomes, they spend all of it every month. Even if it's inadequate income, they don't save money because they don't have enough to save. And it stimulates the economy at a higher rate than even building bridges and roads, like double the amount. We know it works. You're not losing money by doing this. So I'm going to go on to what's going on locally. Now, I have to tell you, when I first read this document, it was not in its final stage. It's currently 39 pages. It's up on their website. It's YWCA, Social Planning and Research Council, Environment Hamilton, ourselves, Disability Justice Network, SASHA, which is the Sexual Assault Center here in Hamilton, Hamilton Acorn. They've been working with tenants and tenants' rights, especially around renovictions. Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion, Hamilton Community Legal Clinic, which houses the Roundtable, and the Hamilton Community Benefits Network, as well as other community members, came to create this document. It got edited down to 39 pages. And I have to tell you, that was some masterful editing, because there was a lot of things people wanted to say. The document includes things that the city of Hamilton cannot do on their own, cannot afford to do. But it was created to make councillors aware of what was going on and what was needed. And even if they're advocating, to keep it in mind, to understand the direction community members from different niches needed to see them going in. And I'm not going to go through all of it because I already see the time and you probably want discussion and questions. So it's really tiny. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can zoom this. Does it get bigger when I do that? Yeah. Does it?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay. So this is just the table of contents to give you an idea, the things that are in there. So investing in women, everything from labor force, childcare, and violence against women, and menstrual products. We're still talking about menstrual products. Mobility justice, especially for persons with disabilities that involve mobility. Getting around during the winter still isn't possible. You can't expect me to go to a job, by the way. I use a wheelchair most of the week. And you can't expect me to get to the office if you won't clear my sidewalk. You just can't. So other disability justice, emergency response, accessing temporary and permanent housing, violence, housing as a human right, a whole bunch of stuff, tackling racism. And let me move over to the other side. Investing in decent jobs, everything from social procurement to paid sick days and living wage policies. There's something when we started living wage at the roundtable, it was kind of a slogan, but it still echoes in my head every time I think of living wage. If someone's going to work full time, they shouldn't be living in poverty, and I don't care what their job is. You're going to put in 35, 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty. You should not be worried about losing your home and paying your bills and engaging in community, including our own community. Of course, inclusive city building, so everything from high-speed internet, food insecurity, accessible spaces, green development, investing in green infrastructure, fair fees for stormwater. So ensuring that what we do as a city actually gets us to where we want to go. Current stormwater policy just creates more storm water that we can't handle, and then it floods our green spaces that we've been trying to protect for what, at least 25 years since I've been living here and rebuilding the bay that we keep flooding with poop. Right? And of course, supporting LGBTQ community. So I'm not going into that whole report, but it is available. I'll just go back here. And let me go 100% here. Oh, maybe a little smaller. There we go. So it's justrecoveryhamilton.ca. If you want to take a look at what's there, if you have a group in Hamilton that you're working with and you want to, you have an opportunity to speak somewhere, you can look at what everyone else is asking for from the municipality. So I'm going to scroll down. Say questions. See, having slides kept me a lot more focused this time instead of rambling like I did last time. So